Good morning. We're here today to conduct not a case study, but a forensic examination. Our subject is a corporate entity that, according to the established physics of macroeconomics, frankly, should not exist in its current form. We are going to deconstruct Nitori Holdings, analyzing it not as a simple retailer, but as a vertically integrated weapon system that has somehow managed to decouple itself from the economic reality of its own nation. This is a masterclass in strategic architecture, and more importantly, the engineering of certainty.
Our deconstruction will proceed in 5 distinct phases. We'll begin with the external market anomaly that first flagged this entity for a deep review. We'll then conduct a full autopsy of its internal physical architecture, dissect its financial weaponry, probe the psychological DNA of its founder, and conclude with a rigorous assessment of its future viability in a fracturing global order. Let us begin. Now, to understand the gravity of this initial segment, we have to first decouple our traditional understanding of market pressures. For any global CEO, a currency crisis is typically viewed as an external event to be weathered. But we will demonstrate that for Nitori, it was treated as a controlled experiment, a self-imposed stress test. So we're not merely observing a market event, we are observing a direct and a very calculated defiance of it.
Here is the foundational fact. The Japanese yen experiences a historic depreciation, reaching 150 against the US dollar. To really comprehend the physics of this pressure, I want you to visualize the balance sheet of a standard Japanese importer. Every single dollar of costs of goods sold sourced from abroad now requires 30, even 40% more yen to procure than it did just a few years ago. This isn't a minor headwind, this is a structural failure. Gross margins are, by definition, vaporized. The entire enterprise is placed in a financial vice, forcing immediate, reactive triage, price hikes, freezes on capital expenditure, hiring pauses. This is the hostile environment in which our subject operates.
And here, we quantify the direct impact of that vice. A 40 billion yen, that's approximately a $265 million increase in costs for fiscal year 2024. This is a direct, unavoidable hit to the profit and loss statement. Now, for any rational corporate board, the strategic response is defense. But Nitori's leadership, they did not treat this as a crisis. They treated it as an offensive opportunity, the culmination of a machine they've been building for 4 decades, a machine designed for this exact moment of maximum external pressure.
And this reveals the core paradox. While every single competitor was forced into a defensive posture, raising prices, alienating consumers, just to protect their collapsing margins, Nitori executed what can only be described as a madman's maneuver. They initiated aggressive price reductions on over 1,000 core items. And at the same time, they maintained their 16% operating profit margin, tracking toward their 37th consecutive year of increased revenue and profit. So let's apply the triple Y framework. The operational trigger was, of course, the currency crisis. The financial impact on competitors, catastrophic. They were forced to raise prices into a recessionary environment, ceding market share directly to Nitori. And the geopolitical implication? Nitori signaled to the entire global investment community that it is structurally insulated from the economic volatility of its own home nation. The question is, how? To answer that, we have to move past the P&L and conduct an autopsy of the physical infrastructure. We now pivot from the external anomaly to the internal mechanics. To understand how Nitori can defy financial gravity, you have to understand that its immunity isn't found in clever marketing or abstract financial instruments alone. No, it is forged in steel, in concrete, and in shipping containers. It is an architecture of absolute, granular control over the physical world. The MLR model: manufacturing, logistics, retail. Now, in an era where the asset-light, outsourced supply chain is dogma, Nitori's model is anachronistic. These are not separate functions delegated to third parties to optimize a spreadsheet. They are a single, fused proprietary system, meticulously designed to eliminate every possible point of value leakage and external dependency. Let's drill down into that logistics pillar. The Airless Doctrine is a clinical obsession with volumetric efficiency. I want you to visualize a 40-foot shipping container. Where a competitor sees empty space between units of hard furniture, Nitori sees a cardinal sin: shipped air that incurs costs but generates zero revenue. Their solution is tactical density. Soft goods, rugs, cushions, bed sheets are designed from the very outset to serve as literal packing material, filling every single void around the furniture. This one act, repeated across thousands of containers every year, slashes the landed cost per unit to a level that is structurally unattainable for any competitor who doesn't own both the factory that makes the couch and the factory that makes the rug. Now let's examine the manufacturing pillar. See, Nitori doesn't view itself as a furniture assembler. It operates as a material science company. Their factories in Hanoi and Indonesia are not mere production plants, they are strategic IP fortresses. Just consider their N-Cool line of bedding. This is not a commodity. It is proprietary intellectual property, a patented cold-sensing fabric technology developed entirely in-house. By owning the chemical specification, the weaving process, and the manufacturing line, they have transformed a simple bedsheet into a high-tech performance product with a seasonal upgrade cycle, much like a smartphone. This creates a recurring revenue moat built on chemical innovation, not just price. They literally own the patent on the value itself.
Okay, having understood the physical architecture of control, we can now finally analyze the engine that powers it all. For Nitori, the balance sheet is not a passive record of accounts. It is an active, kinetic weapon. It is the core instrument in what we call the engineering of absolute certainty in a world that is defined by chaos.
Here is the mechanism of that weapon. While the market was reeling at a spot rate of 150 yen to the dollar, Nitori's entire cost of goods was calculated based on a rate they had locked in months, even years prior, a rate consistently in the 110 yen range. This is achieved through a massive, rolling program of foreign exchange forward contracts. This slide, it doesn't just show a favorable hedge, it shows a company operating in a completely separate, private economic reality from its competitors. They engineered a 40 yen per dollar structural arbitrage against the entire market.
To really grasp the psychology of this hedge, it is critical to understand that this is not a speculative bet. Nitori is not trying to profit from currency movements. In fact, they are actively and willingly sacrificing all potential gains from a strengthening yen. A Western CFO might be fired for such a move. But Nitori isn't buying profit potential, they are buying certainty. By locking in their exchange rate for 100% of their purchasing needs, they eliminate currency volatility as a variable from their entire operational calculus. This allows them to focus on 1 yen cost reductions at the factory level, while their competitors are completely paralyzed, unable to plan beyond the next forex tick.
And this brings us to a crucial point of differentiation that every global CEO must understand. For a publicly traded firm in the West, this long-term strategy would be organizationally untenable. The slavish devotion to the 90-day reporting cycle, the quarterly earnings trap, it forces a short-term reactive posture. A CEO who explained to shareholders that they sacrificed 1 billion yen in potential FX gains just to achieve long-term stability would face an activist investor revolt. Nitori, however, is not playing the same game. They're insulated from this pressure by a very different cultural and psychological framework.
So, to fully grasp the why behind Nitori's unique architecture and its financial strategy, we must now dissect the cultural and psychological drivers. A company's strategy is ultimately a reflection of its founder's worldview, and Nitori's worldview is one of relentless productive paranoia, a mindset that has been encoded into the firm's very DNA. It all begins in 1972. A young Akio Nitori visits California on a furniture industry tour and is shocked by what he calls the affluence gap, the vastly superior quality and lower cost of home furnishings available to the average American compared to the average person in Japan. This Genesis event, born from what you could describe as a strategic inferiority complex, created the mission. His entire corporate strategy, spanning more than half a century, is an attempt to close that gap. This is not quarterly thinking, this is centuries thinking. Nitori operates on a rolling 30-year roadmap. The goal for 2032, global dominance with 3,000 stores, is not some vague aspiration. It is an operational directive that dictates the capital expenditure of today.
And this long-term vision is weaponized within the firm through a core principle, Genjo Hite, or status quo rejection. This is not a motivational slogan, it is an active anti-entropy mechanism designed to combat organizational complacency. Within Nitori's culture, a 10% year-on-year growth is not celebrated as success, it is analyzed as evidence of stagnation, of atrophy. The founder's strategic fear, his productive paranoia, is deployed throughout the entire organization, demanding relentless micro-innovation to ensure that massive physical infrastructure never, ever becomes a liability.
Having examined the past and the present, we now zoom out to assess Nitori's position in the emerging global landscape. In an era of geopolitical fragmentation and deglobalization, we have to analyze whether the company's greatest strength, its immense physical mass, may also represent its greatest existential risk.
Let's apply that triple Y framework to Nitori's pivot to Vietnam. Long before de-risking from China became a boardroom cliché, Nitori was executing a strategic withdrawal. The operational trigger, rising costs, and the increasing political unpredictability of mainland China. The financial impact on competitors is that those still reliant on Chinese manufacturing are now catastrophically exposed to tariffs and supply chain warfare. And the long-term geopolitical implication is that Nitori has built a second Japan in Southeast Asia. Its massive factory complexes in Hanoi and Bariao-Vung-Tau act as the company's brain and lungs, insulating its P&L from US-China conflict. For an institutional investor, this provides a very tangible security premium.
And this leads us to the central strategic debate concerning Nitori's future. In a world that is rapidly digitizing and decentralizing, is this massive physical empire, the factories, the ships, the trucks, the 800-plus stores, a fortress that guarantees survival? Or is it a prison of fixed costs that will prevent adaptation?
Here is the core tension, laid bare. The dominant philosophy of the last 2 decades has been the asset-light model, prized for its agility and low fixed costs. Nitori represents the antithesis, an asset-extreme model. Its advantages are undeniable: total control over every variable and a structural moat that is nearly impossible for a competitor to replicate. But the disadvantages are equally severe: high inertia and the ever-present risk of a fixed-cost hell should consumer demand fundamentally shift away from large-format physical retail. Nitori has bet the entire house on physicality and control.
Finally, a truly exhaustive analysis requires us to examine the second-order implications of this strategy, because Nitori's actions do not occur in a vacuum. Their in-house logistics division systematically starves Japan's independent third-party trucking industry of volume, forcing consolidation and attrition. Their predatory price cutting, framed as a gift to consumers, is a scorched earth campaign that directly accelerates the failure rate of small and medium-sized furniture retailers, effectively clearing the market of competition. You see, Nitori is not just competing within the Japanese economy, its actions are redrawing the economic map itself.
Which leaves us with the final, precipitating question for your consideration. As global supply chains continue to fracture and the era of frictionless trade recedes, has Nitori inadvertently built the arc? Is this Vertical Leviathan, this strategy of total physical control, the only model that can guarantee survival in a deglobalizing world? Or will its very mass and inertia cause it to sink first when the landscape truly changes? That is the multi-billion-dollar question that boards and investors must now contend with.